It's
fine.
good.
It's fine. It's too much work. All right. Whether or not you're originally from California, you're now lucky enough to call this place home. California's rich agricultural history is what helped develop the vibrant and diverse culture we now have. The citrus boom that helped California obtain the reputation it has now is what's referred to as the Second California Gold Rush, as stated on parks.ca.gov in the California Citrus State Historic Park information. With California's beautiful climate and nutritious soil, the booming success brought to the state through citrus cultivation is seen all around us. Living in San Luis Obispo, we're surrounded by agricultural practices that we may take advantage. However, for people 200 years ago, that was the only way to live. As I mentioned in my previous speeches, I'm from Riverside, California, which was the most successful citrus powerhouses at the time. Originally built in the 1950s and later remodeled in the 1980s, my home is a ranch house on some of the original Southern California orange groves and has some of the original orange trees that still have always been a part of my family. I included this slide here. Excuse the watermarks. It was $10 to purchase each image, so I was like, watermarks it is. Here you can see some of the original groves and the plots they're on in 1948 and later in 1967, how those have turned to houses. And then I did an additional slide here, which shows my house in 1967 after it became kind of more incorporated. You can see the 4x4 row of orange trees. And then here it is now. We're one of the few residents that still have the orange trees. And then here's, just so everyone can kind of put it in perspective, here's Disneyland, the property in 1953. It was entirely agricultural citrus fields. And then only 10 years later, it's amazing how quickly Orange County kind of got developed and how you can even see the intersections on the freeway develop that quickly in 10 years. The first citrus seeds were brought to California in 1701 by the Spanish from Mexico, and some of us may be familiar with the Spanish missions that are all throughout the California coast. There's even one here in San Luis Obispo, and here's a little map of them if you aren't as familiar. The first citrus groves were on Spanish mission grounds, established in 1771, and have become a big part of Hispanic culture. By 1804, the largest grove at the time was located in modern-day Los Angeles, more specifically the San Gabriel Valley. And here I kind of highlighted which mission it was that had the, that had the biggest orchard at the time. It was 6 acres with 400 trees, which isn't that big, but at the time it was a lot to have growing. And that kind of just provided oranges to the mission and neighboring communities. As news spread that California was ideal for growing citrus, many people came here and planted their own groves, own settlements, and were trying to maximize production with equipment available at the time. And then 40 years later, in 1841, by William Wolfskill, the first commercial orchard was opened. And then I have a little picture of him. He's very handsome, as you can see. And by 1858, his orchard at the time grew to 72 acres. And a little while later, a little less than 10 years, 1862, he owned 2/3 of California's orchards. 37 years in business, 1878, William Wolfskill opened the first commercial packing house. And according to the historic context for the City of Ontario's citrus industry, it highlighted that the journey to success was not easy for Wolfskill, as he often dealt with pests, root disease, leaf disease, and weather issues. The weather was always fluctuating when he didn't want it to. The most common orange found in California at the time was the navel orange, which is the orange a lot of us are even still familiar with today. And it's also the oranges grown in my backyard. They are best for the warm climate, and we do have naturally healthy soil here in California. And let's see here. At the time of peak production, Southern California was the hub of the agricultural community. And in the 1870s, California was declared, and I quote, a powerful magnet for people who are ready to make a new start in a promising new place, as mentioned in Riverside, Paradise Found. In the 1880s, the most successful territories were located in Los Angeles, San Bernardino County, Orange County, and Riverside County, which I kind of have a map here showing us where you are now and where those counties are if you aren't from California. And at the time of peak production, let's see, the 1880s, these were the territories that were filled, and by 1915, the citrus industry was a $200 million industry, and in today's money, that would be $5.2 billion. At the time, between 1905 and 1930, the most common ranch properties all over Southern California were this craftsman-style home, and these kind of turned what was kind of like desolate land into more lively mini metropolitans. I have a picture of an original Orange Grove house in Pasadena, California, back between that time period, and a picture of my own house. You can kind of see the similarities between the columns at the entrance and kind of some of the windows are the same. And then this is my sister and I. When we were kids, we used to sell like the fruit. This is all grown on our property, which we kind of love doing together as a family. Let's see. Homes were often laid out on rectangular plots of land with the homes surrounded on all three sides by the orange groves, kind of like you saw in mine with the rows of orange trees in the back, some on the side. We don't really have that at my house just because the land's smaller. And between the 1930s and present day, the need for additional housing, schools, and other government buildings increased, and the acreage of orange groves dwindled down, as you saw with like the industrialization of Disneyland and everything. And after reading more from the state park information, it was so crazy to think that only 200 years ago, what's now like downtown Los Angeles and high-rises was just, it said specifically lemon, lime, and orange trees. I thought that was so crazy to think how quickly things can change. And while the trees themselves may not exist, the history is still very much alive. There are museums, government resources, and education programs dedicated to this today. In Riverside, California, which is kind of where I live, the state of California turned 250 acres of their original orange groves into a state park, and they kind of invite you to go back in time and experience what people were experiencing back then. You're even welcome to pick your own oranges. I'm not sure if there's a price. I heard there wasn't, but it sounds too good to be true, so I'm not sure. And then in Upland, California, you'll also find Cooper Museum. Oh, here's some more pictures, just kind of the view. I forgot I had this slide, but this is the view. I thought it was so amazing. You don't really see stuff like this in California, and I thought it was so picturesque with the palm trees mixed in. And then in Upland, California, which is kind of near Los Angeles, you'll find Cooper Museum, which has hosted many historical stories, pictures that capture the essence of what life was like. In addition to these two resources, there's all types of information in public library databases. And another interesting thing I found was that at UC Davis, there's an experimental orchard to learn about different crops and techniques named after no other than William Wolfskill. It's called Wolfskill Experimental Orchard. So whether you are a resident of North or South California, I think this is really important to learn about. After all, it is what brought a lot of money and people to California.